Hello and welcome. The noteworthy channel In the Interests of the People with Martin North and John Adams courageously broadcast a critical re-examination of a 20-year-old ABC late-line radio segment. The 1975 42-minute broadcast hosted by Richard Neville ignited one of the most immediate and explosive public backlashes in Australian media history. Titled Pederasty, the programme aired on the 14th of July 1975 and featured 3 adult men who openly admitted having sexual relationships with young boys, joined by a teenage boy who discussed his involvement with older men since the age of 12. This morally reprehensible broadcast crossed ethical lines and advocated normalising what the law and common decency unanimously condemn: sexual conduct between adults and minors. The ABC and government agency have strenuously suppressed this tape for 2 decades, but the intrepid John Adams secured a copy and fearlessly played it on the IOTP channel. Predictably, it was deleted from YouTube in about 4 hours. But this vital expose distills and reframes that vile occurrence into a single, clear narrative with one central message. No matter the era, the rationale, or the romantic gloss, sexual conduct between adults and minors is exploitative, unlawful, and harmful. Full stop. This difficult listening requires a strong stomach, since for any morally sound individual, it's not just sickening, but unspeakably evil. It tries to pass itself off as a debate about taste and culture, but the first few minutes reveal overtly pedophilic encouragement. There's a clear line drawn by law for the protection of children, and it's a line supported by decades of psychological research, lived experience, and social consensus. My task here is twofold: to examine what's presented in that suppressed recording and to demonstrate why its arguments fail and why today's legal and ethical standards reject them outright. If the subject is too distressing for you, please go no further. Your well-being, emotional balance, and spiritual equilibrium matter. The recording features an extended conversation I found utterly repellent and won't relate here in detail. However, I'll include a link in the show notes if you can tolerate grotesquely offensive dialogue. Copies are also available from the Internet Archive. Such long-standing obfuscation derives from its sordid attempt at conflating public revulsion with curiosity, invoking ancient Greek precedent and entertaining the idea that such relationships are mutually affectionate, educational, or even liberating. It dishonestly implied that informed consent from boys could be meaningful, that initiation could come from the minor, that secrecy was forced by stigma, and that society's problem was its denial of youthful sexuality. Pervert participants spoke in specifically ascetic or romantic terms about the boys' bodies, lewdly acknowledging strategies of allure, gifts, and education, while disingenuously insisting they were not dirty old men, but caring partners. They absurdly argued that any trauma associated with a discovered relationship came from the court system or parents, not from the unlawful sexual conduct itself. They brazenly cast themselves as mentors or father figures, characterising boys as commercially minded, eager, or already active with peers. Historical references to pederasty were used as cultural permission slips. Secrecy was framed as necessity, and consent was presumed and romanticised. No matter how deviously inducing their flowery language, the law is unambiguously clear, and it's there to protect vulnerable children. In contemporary Australia, sexual activity between adults and minors is illegal, period. The age of consent varies by state and territory, 16 in most jurisdictions, 17 in some. But the principle is the same. Minors cannot legally consent to sexual relations with adults. Beyond the age threshold, there are also grooming and exploitation offences, as well as aggravated penalties where there's a relationship authority or trust or dependency. Possession or creation of any sexualised material involving minors is a serious crime, a salient fact that demands criminal investigation into school gender ideology grooming. These laws aren't culture wars or moral panic codified. They're protections born of hard lessons and sustained evidence of serious harm of inestimable consequence. No amount of slippery rhetoric about education, romance, or mutuality changes that. Consent must be comprehensively informed, free of coercion, and developmentally competent. Children and young teens do not and cannot meet that standard in relation to adults. The law recognises, as indeed does common sense, that power, age and maturity gaps render authentic equal consent impossible. The ABC's deeply offensive recording blurred the boundaries of consent, suggesting minors can initiate, that their curiosity validates adult involvement, or that gifts and attention reflect genuine affection rather than leverage. That confuses sexual curiosity with capacity. It conflates a child's response to attention with informed consent. It misleadingly reframes grooming behaviours as kindness. Let's be unequivocal. Power is not just age, it's experience, cognitive maturity, social authority, economic means, and control over context. Gifts, treats, and instructions aren't signs of equal partnership. They're classic grooming tools that create obligation, confuse boundaries, and manufacture complicity. A minor's sexual curiosity does not justify adult involvement. The adult's role is to protect boundaries, not to transgress them. Saying that boys are already active with peers does not authorise adults to step in. Peer-to-peer exploitation among similarly aged adolescents is a very different moral and legal category than an adult targeting a minor. The law recognises this difference. So should any ethical framework. Psychological harm is real, even when not immediately visible. A refrain in the discussion was that harm stemmed from discovery and prosecution, and not from the sexual conduct itself. Well, that weaseling argument fails on evidence. Many survivors of child sex abuse describe delayed, complex and long-lasting effects, including shame, confusion about boundaries, difficulties with trust and intimacy, depression, anxiety and trauma responses. Apparent acceptance or even positive descriptions of an experience at the time does not invalidate harm. Children and teens often reinterpret experiences as they mature. They also downplay harm when the adult is charismatic, supportive, or positioned as a mentor. The broadcaster's suggestion that love mitigates harm conveniently ignores the core problem, the adult's responsibility. Adults are tasked with safeguarding the developmental needs and dignity of minors. Claiming benevolence or mentorship while seeking sexual access isn't care, it's exploitation, masquerading as affection. Why the education and liberation argument always fails is because cloaking sexual access in educational language, teaching boys skills, providing rides, instilling confidence, conflates mentorship with sexual entitlement. An adult can mentor, guide and support young people without any sexual dimension. In fact, the mark of a genuine mentorship is the maintenance of boundaries that protect the mentee's autonomy and developmental integrity. Liberation is not achieved by collapsing a child's boundaries. Liberation for a young person, it looks like safety, respect, and freedom from sexual pressure. It involves age-appropriate information, secure relationship with trusted adults who do not sexualize them, and environments where consent in all aspects of life is learned through modelling, not violated in the name of education. Ancient Greece is often invoked in apologies for pederasty, but sly distortion of history are not permission slips. Historical practice does not override modern law, ethics, or our evolved understanding of child development and rights. Societies once normalised many things we reject today: child labour, martial coercion, corporal punishment in schools. Our moral progress involves learning from harms that were once accepted and then doing better. Australia's current legal frameworks reflect a modern consensus. Children are rights-bearing individuals entitled to bodily autonomy and protection from sexual exploitation. That's the gold standard, and past customs do not trump it. A striking feature of the show was the objectification of boys, reducing them to physiques, idealised innocence and fantasy. That erases individuality and agency. When you aestheticize a child to justify sexual access, you've already overstepped ethical lines. People are not canvases for adult longing. Children are not decorative vehicles for adult self-discovery. Protecting their personhood requires that we reject narratives that romanticize their sexualization by adults. Another theme in the broadcast was secrecy, the thrill or the furtive element forced by social stigma. Let's be blunt. Secrecy in this context exists because the conduct is wrong, morally repugnant, spiritually unforgivable, and illegal. The excitement of concealment is not a social injustice, it's a red flag. Healthy relationships don't need to be hidden from the ordinary scrutiny of family, community, or law. Some speakers claim that legal or parental intervention traumatized the child more than the sexual relationship itself. That shifts responsibility away from the adult who initiated the boundary violation. When a parent reacts or when courts intervene, they do so, in principle, to protect a child, even if imperfectly. The adult who created the risk bears the responsibility for the fallout. We can and should call for trauma-informed, child-centred responses. We must never accept the premise that avoiding scrutiny justifies maintaining an abusive dynamic. The recording asked why public sentiment is so strong against such relationships. The answer isn't prudishness or denial. It's recognition of developmental vulnerability and the impossibility of equal consent across a large age and power gap. The predictable patterns of grooming that blur kindness with coercion, the long tail of harm that many survivors carry, the state's duty to protect minors from exploitation. Our condemnation is not fear of sexuality, it's defence of children's rights and safety. That the broadcast happened at all is a window into a different time, when airing such perspectives was framed as edgy inquiry. Today, platforms and producers bear a higher responsibility to avoid giving legitimising oxygen to narratives that endanger children. If archival material surfaces, it should be presented with context, with survivor-informed framing, and with zero equivocation about the law and ethics. Curiosity cannot come at the cost of normalising harm. Sexual conduct between adults and minors is illegal in Australia and most jurisdictions worldwide, with additional protections against grooming and abuse of authority. No historical, cultural, romantic, or educational rationale excuses or mitigates this. Consent from a minor in relation to an adult is not valid. Gifts, flattery, secrecy, and mentorship narratives are hallmarks of grooming, not of healthy relationships. The harms, psychological, rational and developmental, are well documented, even if they're delayed or denied or disguised at the time. We must centre the rights, safety and dignity of minors, not adult fantasies about them. If anything reported here resonates personally, please reach out to a trusted person or a local support service in your area. If you're an adult who recognises unhealthy dynamics with minors, seek professional help immediately. The ethical path is to protect, not to pursue. Revisiting this broadcast is uncomfortable, but that's the point. It helps us to see how far we've come and why those changes were necessary. The line in this is clear and unmistakable. Responsible adults do not have sexual relationship with minors. Protect children, respect the law, hold boundaries, and build a culture that's safe for young people to grow into their own futures, free from wounding exploitation veiled as affection or education. Thank you for watching.